Now we're going to look at some of the more common problems that occur when taking food photos and how you can sort of navigate some of these problems and come up with better photos when in the face of them. Reflections in glass or silverware or shiny porcelain plates is a very common issue and a really hard one to deal with, especially when you're working with natural light. It ultimately comes down to the relative angle between your camera, subject, and light source. If you have the availability to move your light source, then it becomes a little bit easier to figure out the sweet spot where those reflections aren't playing as prominently. But when you're working with natural daylight, the direction of sunlight is pretty fixed. So you then have to move your subject or camera angle in relation to that sun in order to get a similar type of light, but without the reflection. You can try flagging it by blocking just certain portions of light with something like a black piece of foam core or a black poster board or just any type of opaque object. But this is where we start to get into some of the more advanced lighting in photography and is going to take a lot of creative problem solving to get rid of. There are other ways to minimize reflections, like working with matte and non-reflective surfaces. And you can use something like textured glass in order to minimize those reflections. Dull looking food is another common problem and could be for many reasons. It's most likely due to the light that you're shooting your photos in. Not enough light is probably the most common culprit of dull looking food. This could also be the case if you're using interior lighting with strong, warm color casts. In order to fix food that looks dull, try to get more light on the subject, bring it closer to your light source, amplify your light source if you're able to, and that should help to saturate your colors more. If that doesn't help, you can try taking it into editing, but sometimes if it's captured looking dull, there's only so much that you can really do in editing to fix that. Flat lighting can usually be fixed pretty simply, actually, by just changing the positioning of your subject to the light source. When you light a subject so that the light is parallel to that subject's face, the lighting is going to appear flat. And when your lighting is flat, your subject lacks any type of depth or dimension. With food photography, it's common to light your subjects from side light or backlight in order to add some more depth and dimension to them. Flash should generally be avoided because it's going to give your subject a flat light. If you're in a situation where you don't have enough available light, like a dimly lit restaurant, you can try using your night mode in order to take a longer exposure of that subject. Your night mode will appear in your default iPhone camera when you're in a dimly lit environment. Once the icon appears, you can tap on it and control the slider in order to take a longer exposure and capture more available light. If you have a friend with you, you can try using their flash to add some light onto your subject by placing it either to the side or back of your subject and see if that can add enough available light. Commonly, the flashes on our iPhones are going to be really harsh light and won't be that pleasing on your subject regardless of how it's placed, but you can experiment and maybe even put some tissue paper in front of the flash to soften it up, and maybe that'll add enough available light. It's very difficult to shoot under dim restaurant lighting. Like I just mentioned, you can try using flash from a friend in order to add some light. If the restaurant has a light source on the table, like a lamp or maybe a candle, you can try placing that closer to your subject, and that might add some more light. Otherwise, the only other option that you really have is to try to use the night mode. Mixing color temperatures is another common problem that a lot of people don't notice that they're doing. Mixing color temperatures should generally be avoided because warm light and cool light can start to battle in an image. When you're looking for color accuracy in your food photos, warm color casts and cool color casts competing really doesn't help in getting accurate colors. If you're working in a restaurant, it's kind of hard to avoid this, but if you're working at home, then turning off your interior lights and just using daylight is your best bet. If you don't have enough light on that subject, bouncing daylight back into your subject, either using any old white object or a dedicated reflector, is a great practice. Cluttered backgrounds or environments are another common problem, but easy fix. The first step is recognizing that your background or environment is feeling cluttered. And then it's a matter of finding a new position to shoot your subject from or a new angle. If you're shooting at home, you probably have a lot of flexibility to change the angle of your shot. If you're shooting at a restaurant, it can be a little bit more difficult. If you're finding that the restaurant is really busy and there's a lot of distracting elements in your background, maybe something like a lay flat image or an image taken from that 45-degree zone would be better suited, where you can focus on the table in front of you and exclude the rest of the restaurant. Another consideration to have at a restaurant is making sure that the table is clear. It's common that phones, wallets, and personal belongings have made it onto that table. In order to get a good photo, you're going to need to clear all of those elements out of the frame and bring it back to just what the restaurant had set up on that table. Even that can sometimes be a little bit too much, and you might need to rearrange some of those elements. It's also good to consider what's behind your main subject and make sure that that area behind your main subject is isolated. If there's objects peeking out from directly behind your subject, it can be very distracting for your audience. And when you're working with a camera that has a deep depth of field like an iPhone, those elements can sometimes blend directly into your main subject, and it can be hard to separate them. On this slide, we can see a roundup of the most important concepts that we went over in this section. This slide serves as a great resource for you leaving this course to print out and remind you of some of the most important concepts that you should be thinking about when shooting food photos. In the next section of this course, we're going to talk about how to edit your food photos using your iPhone.